Hi everyone, and welcome to this panel about CERN people. Sorry for the slight delay, we had a few technical issues in here we're trying to resolve, so apologies for that. So CERN people is a whole new way of making and accessing factual material. I've got Roger Graef here from Films of Record, who's the producer. I've got two directors. There's Johnny Taylor and Liz Mermin. I've got Peter Barron from Google, who will explain what this is all about and how it's a new venture and a new type of production. So first of all, Roger, can you just tell us what it is?
Well, as somebody who's taken as much as 2 years, 3 years to get access to difficult institutions like Great Ormond Street, which Johnny's just directed last week's episode, I commend it to you. It's still on iPlayer. It's wonderful. But that took 2 years. I was rung up and offered access to CERN, and I could hardly believe it, and flew with Johnny to Geneva, and they said, yeah, what do you want to do? You know, it was absolutely amazing, completely unheard of. And with Liz and I had been trying to make films together for a bit, and Liz is a great star of Storyvilles, and so we went to Nick Fraser, who said very kindly that he would pay for some development on this, and we went down there, and Liz came back with some very interesting footage, but Nick asked the question very straightforwardly, and it's important you understand this in relation to what Peter responded to. He said, well, are they going to find the Higgs? And we said, well, we don't know, and they don't know. Okay, and if they do find it, who will find it? And we said, well, there are 3,000 people looking at 3 experiments competing, and they don't know, so we don't know. So he said, so you don't know what's going to happen, and you don't know who's going to be doing it. So we said, that's a bit of a problem. He said, yes, indeed, for television, it's a bit of a problem. We want a narrative, we need a sort of predictable journey. So we said, well, this is actually about uncertainty. This is the whole point. It's something that's at the edge of the human knowledge. And that's wonderful. It's the end of a journey that really started about 60 or 70 years ago in physics, and it's the most exciting year in the history of particle physics. Isn't that worth doing? And he said, well, I can see what excites you about it, but we do stories. So if without a story, we can't do it. And I couldn't believe that we were going to use this wonderful access for this amazing stuff. And thought of Peter, whom I'd known a bit, and thought that at Google, he was in a position to use this content at a point when Google Plus was being launched, and that we would become a kind of experiment, showcase experiment for how to use our techniques and interesting but difficult content in a new way. So we had a meeting. Peter it could not have been more responsive. And there are now 10 episodes up, and there are another 4 or 5 which are coming. And it's up to Peter really to talk about his feeling about it, but I must say I'm incredibly proud of it, and feel that we are actually, what I call the new physics of television is about the fact that it's not linear. These things did happen in a certain sequence, but they're not time-related. You can watch them in any order, just like quantum physics. When we were launching it at Google, it sort of came to me as a moment. This resembles the same thing that the physicists are doing, in that it is, no, not in a straight order, but it is a very rich experience, I hope. If those of you who've seen it, we're going to play a few episodes for you so that you can get a feeling for that. But the people who've responded best to me are those who are frightened of science and said, I never thought I could watch a film about physics, but it's not about physics, it's about physicists and what it's like to live with uncertainty. So that's what CERN people is.
So what's the format? What is an episode?
Well, it's about anything between 2.5 to 5 minutes about a kind of dilemma or a predicament or a situation. It's much more of an impressionistic series of films than it is a story. And I don't know about all of you, but one of the most interesting differences for documentaries of different kinds is whether the narrative is the absolute driver, jeopardy, resolution, and so on, or whether you can make films about situations and process that leave you and that give you an experience of it without actually ending in a kind of neat way. And I'm particularly drawn to that second kind of film because I think it's much closer to life than creating false certainties and false arcs which you impose on more difficult situations. So that's certainly in Films of Record's work over 32 years now, 33 years. we have been always tempted. I don't know if any of you saw, but we got Rail Cops, got nearly 5 million viewers, in which absolutely nothing happened most of the time, but very interesting characters were just managing the railways. I like that. I'm interested in that. So anyway, that, I don't know, that's rather a long answer to your question. Sorry.
And how do people actually access this content?
Oh, they go on YouTube or Google Plus to see CERN people, and you just follow the access, and then you've got a menu of 10 films, and you can watch them, as I said, in any order. It's lovely. It's very much and one of the nicest emails we just got recently, somebody who said they're hooked now, and it's their lunchtime viewing. Along with TED Talks, they sit there watching our films every lunchtime, which is really nice.
So, Peter, why and how did this proposal appeal to you? And how does it fit Google's objectives?
Well, I mean, although I am a sort of old TV hack, having been at Newsnet, and that's how I know Roger, Google is a technology company and not a media company. But we have always been very interested in promoting science and technology education. So we've done sort of a range of different things with the Science Museum, with Bletchley Park, et cetera, et cetera. So Roger, I'm not sure how long ago it was, maybe 9 months ago, something like that. Roger and Liz came in, and Roger said, you guys are very interested in STEM education. And I said, yeah, science and technology education. And he said, well, what do you think about funding a film, fly on the wall film at CERN? And my initial reaction was, well, yes, we're interested in promoting science and technology education, but we don't do content. We don't tend to fund film content. To which his response was, yeah, but this isn't going to be a documentary that we sort of save up all the material and squirrel it away and then put it out in 2013, like most documentaries. Although we're going to do that as well. What we're going to do is, because there's so much excitement and activity going on around all these discoveries happening week in, week out, what we want to do is drip it out as it happens. And you can just imagine you've got these incredible discoveries happening almost daily in the news. And this was back in the beginning of the year when there was high excitement about what was going on at CERN. Neutrinos and so on. Wouldn't it be great if we could sort of drip this out and actually meet the scientists involved in these incredible experiments as they're doing them? So I thought, well, that is starting to sound very interesting. And as Roger said, we had just launched Google Plus. At that point, the very aim of it being to easily share video, to have communities who could speak to each other, etc., etc. And then putting together the Google Plus page and a YouTube channel, it seemed to us to be an absolutely perfect vehicle to do a kind of real-time documentary where you were both putting out the content, but also engaging with the content, having people talk about it, actually meeting the characters involved in the documentary as you went along. So we got involved. We give Roger and Liz a little bit of seed funding to get going, and I think the results have been fantastic. I mean, the figures, they're not massive, but about 100,000 people have engaged with this so far. I think it's about 40,000 followers on Google Plus and about 50,000 views on YouTube. So 100,000 people engaging with very high-end particle physics, I think is rather a success story. So we're delighted to be involved in it, and I think it's a great example of how you can use platforms in very interesting ways. And I think also it's an interesting issue because it doesn't require a commissioning editor. You can start to make films and put them out to an audience without having to go through the process of getting the commissioning editor to agree to make the film.
Is anyone in the audience one of these followers? And has anyone actually looked at any of these films yet? Oh yeah, one or two. That's good. Okay. So we can convert some new followers.
Certain people.
Yes.
So should we just take a look at an example of one of these films then? So we're going to look at a film called Caution and Excitement. So Liz, can you tell us what we're about to see?
Sure. This was the first one actually it's interesting because this is the first shoot that we did with the explicit goal in mind, knowing that we were going to have to make one of these short films. And so because we've been doing some development shooting before, obviously, with a different goal in mind. And this is about, last December, there was a big press conference at CERN about new findings about the search for the Higgs Boson, which, this missing crucial particle that explains why we're all here and how we're all here. And it's been theorized since 1970, but it may or may not actually exist. And the whole point, the reason, and the headline reason behind building the Large Hadron Collider, this 27-kilometer round ring that goes under France and Geneva and is the sort of centerpiece of CERN, was to find the Higgs boson, and they are closing in, and in 2012 it's guaranteed that either they will find it or they will rule it out unless something disastrous happens. So this film is from a press conference in December where they sort of said, all right, well, at the end of 2011, this is where we've gotten. There was a lot of hype in the media, mainstream media, beforehand about they found the Higgs, you know, they've figured out where it is. It was all overplayed, and it was all rather inaccurate, as much I've found since I've been involved with this science journalism and science reporting is. People kind of overreact all the time to every little leak or every little press release and make big stories when actually the stories are much more gradual and they're leading up to something big. So the idea here was to be a bit behind the scenes in this big press event and say, all right, well, this is what the headlines are, but this is a bit how we're feeling about what's going on, and also give a kind of human response to being on the edge of big discovery. So that was the goal of this film.
Okay. So could you play caution and excitement, please?
There isn't a chance of me getting into that meeting room now. It's been full since 11 o'clock, apparently.
So, in conclusion, the window for the Higgs mass gets smaller and smaller. However, it's still alive. But be careful. It's intriguing hints, several channels, in 2 experiments, but we are talking about small numbers. And keep in mind that we are also running next year. We have not found it yet, we have not excluded it yet. Stay tuned for next year. Thank you very much. Merry Christmas, etc.
I can't think of a better set of results in setting the stage for next year. It looks like there could be something there. There's some contradictions. There's a little range where there's all kinds of possibilities. We haven't ruled it out completely. We can't guarantee it's there. It's all the suspense. It's like a Disney movie.
We still need many more collisions next year in order to get a definite answer on the Shakespeare question on the Higgs to be or not to be.
Like the Higgs, we had a hint of a signal. We emailed the entire collaboration, warning them in the next 2 weeks we may have a discovery of a new fundamental force in our hands. More data came in, and we're just waiting for a few more events, and they never came. So this is statistics, this is probability. I mean, the chances of flipping a coin heads up 10 times in a row is low, but it happens, and that basically happened to us. It was very emotionally draining, actually. This is also why I'm not so excited about the Higgs, because I've seen such significant excesses disappear to nothing.
Science is very conservative discipline. It's something in which the bigger is your claim, the harder time you have in your life to convince everybody, because you really have to convince everybody.
A collaboration like Atlas, it has nearly 3,000 people on it. Everyone who is a member of this collaboration should be happy that the results that are being produced in their name are right.
We're all scientists, we're all equals. If somebody has a very strong complaint about a result or something that we're potentially putting out, and they're willing to speak out against it strongly, they can stop the whole process. One person.
Are you asking me if I would like that there is a Higgs boson, or that I would like that there is no Higgs boson? I would say I have no opinion on the Higgs boson. It is a theoretical mechanism, it's a theoretical model, and my mission as an experimentalist, as I see it, is to try and rule out. It's not up to me to kind of have an opinion on what nature is.
Could you hear the sound okay on that? Oh, good.
We couldn't.
No, we just hear you, we can't.
Over here.
So, can I ask all of you, really? I mean, what's going to happen to this project if they don't find it?
Well, actually, I mean, this is one of it's a funny question because it's the first thing that the sort of TV commissioner said, well, it's about finding Higgs, and what if they don't find the Higgs? But actually, and it strike me watching this, that the question about how much background information, this is, the 4th film we put up, and it leaves a few questions unanswered. We've gotten better at making them sound on their own, so I apologize if that was a bit confusing.
I think that's true.
We're learning lessons as we go along, and I hadn't revisited this for a while. But one of the things that comes out in a number of the films is the fact that finding the Higgs is great, because they've been looking for it for ages, and they've theorized that it exists, and it's a very elegant concept, and it explains everything that we know about the physical world. But if they don't find it, and it's a bit hard to get your mind around the idea if they don't find it, it might just be hiding somewhere else. But actually, the science is so incredibly rigorous, this machine is so rigorous, that by not finding it, what it means is that they will have looked everywhere it is possible to look for this thing to exist as it has been theorized. If they don't find it this year and the machine works the way it's supposed to, it doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, that means that the whole premise on which particle physics has been based since 1970 is wrong. And somebody has to come up with a different theory. And so the physicists are all much more excited about that outcome. I mean, they all sort of, we've been looking for ages, so we really want to find it, because but actually, if they don't find it, that's much, much bigger news. It's huge news. So we're sort of hoping that maybe they won't find it, because that's a much better story, but somehow I think you have to be in their world a little longer to understand that that's true. In a feature, at the end of a feature, 20 minutes into a feature film, you'll get that, but somehow when you sit down and say it, people still scratch their heads. But I'm hoping they don't. That'll be really interesting.
There's a wonderful concept in science, and you will all have known the phrase paradigm shift, but the paradigm is what we know, the best explanation for a situation. And the standard model in physics is what was started all those years ago, and the Higgs is the missing bit. So that's the paradigm. But if it doesn't match the evidence, then there has to be a paradigm shift. They have to find something else. And that the game that's being played between the theoreticians and the experimentalists is about that. The experimentalists keep wanting to find something the theoreticians can't explain. So there are quite a lot of people rooting for not finding the Higgs. And the point that struck me about halfway through our project, and it just came like a sort of light bulb moment, was that this was the most expensive and the largest machine in the history of the world, looking for one of the smallest particles in the history of the world. And even if they think they found it, they can't prove it. Now, there's something so astonishing about that I feel very privileged to be allowed in on these conversations. I really do.
I think what's really interesting about this from a sort of TV point of view is that almost all TV documentaries of a certain kind these days follow a particular formula, whether it's A Dog's Home or The Large Hadron Collider. Yeah. And you can sort of almost hear the script, saying the physicists at CERN are getting nervous. The team is falling apart. 2/3 of the way through, we need that drama, we need that jeopardy, and then it all resolves in the end, and they find the Higgs boson, and everybody goes home happy.
Open the champagne.
But obviously, life and physics aren't like that. So I think this project is much more like real life, isn't it? It's messy,
Absolutely.
and it's inconclusive, and it happens. It happens as it happens. It hasn't been manufactured or formatted.
Is it actually episodic? Do you have to view these episodes in a certain order?
No. Well, we're setting up trilogies of films. Yeah, Johnny, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we have most of them that we've done so far have been sort of vignettes, I'd say, rather than episodes, probably. But then we do 3-parters, which work quite nicely to go into some of the more complex stuff, because there is, in 2 minutes or 3 minutes, trying to get through particle physics is impossible. In 9 minutes, it's still impossible, but you can do a bit more. So we still keep them very short and punchy, but yeah, you don't have to, apart from those ones, you view them however.
There's a very interesting problem, which again is a documentary problem for science films, and that is, and people have talked about this with some of the beautiful horizons that have been made about this, and I take my hat off to them, they're wonderful films. But they say that people think they've understood the first 5 minutes or the 10 minutes and so on, and then by 15 minutes in, they've forgotten the first 10 minutes. It's just too hard to remember. It's so unfamiliar that they can't really hold on to that information. So you have a sense of understanding without actually having information you can use. So that's one of the attractions of these bite-sized films. It's just about as much physics as you can get your head around. And then if you're ready, you go on to the next bit.
And I also think that it's the way the nature of a documentary about science is that there's a march of progress in thought, and there's moves towards something. Whereas actually it's far more of an ebb and flow. And you go out to CERN and they work really hard for a bit, they get a result out, then they go back, scratch their heads, and think again. And what they always say, which I find incredible, is that they say, oh, this shouldn't work, but we'll just get cleverer, and it will make it work. So it's not that they just know if they keep carrying on, they'll get to the end. They have to rethink every time. So when you go out there, there is such an ebb and flow that these films fit that style of, some of them are more relaxed and jokey, the other ones are more pressured. Rather than just keep building the tension, you can move with the people a lot more, I think.
But are you scientists? Do you speak their language? No. So how do you know what they're talking about?
Well, I mean, I think in a way it's I always say about all of my films, it's sort of the dilettantish aspect of being a filmmaker or a journalist is, you go into a world that you know nothing about. The first film I did for BBC was about hairdressers in Afghanistan. I'd never been to Afghanistan. I didn't know anything about hairdressing, but that's part of that process of discovery is part of what becomes the narrative of the film, and it helps you identify with your audience, figure out how to tell the story. Now, with science, obviously, it's a lot harder, but I think that, we both read a lot. We did our homework. And if you work hard enough, you realize that what you need to understand to have an intelligent conversation with them it's not nothing, but you can get to a point where you're comfortable, and it's very important that you do that because they have to respect us enough to talk to us openly, otherwise we're wasting their time. And then our job as filmmakers is to figure out, all right, how do we simplify that into some language and some little nugget of information that our viewers online, that someone on YouTube who's just sort of curious and heard about CERN can go on and log on and find out. But we have to know a lot more than we expect our viewers to know. And that's part of the fun of it, is that it's been a sort of crash course in particle physics. And my dad's a physicist, which helps a bit for me.
Well, but also I think what's really appealing about it is that they really come across as human beings. And because normally in this sort of science documentary, you don't see scientists eating food or drinking beer or sort of celebrating. There's a great scene, I'm not sure if we're going to see it, where they sort of go out and get pissed because they've just had an article published in Nature. Yeah. And so, I think it's really appealing about it. You kind of recognise people that you know in these people, and they don't seem on a complete pedestal. So I think that's very fascinating. In fact, quite a lot of them are a lot like people who work in people.
Absolutely, especially the BBC as well. I was just going to say that there are two things that, as a comfort to those of you, the vast majority of you who haven't watched this stuff and it may still be put off, is that on the plane to Geneva, reading a very short introduction to particle physics, in about page 10 of this book, from a very hotshot Cambridge mathematician, he says, look, if you find this difficult, don't worry, nobody understands it, right? So you think, well, that's quite interesting. And then the Horizon, this wonderful Horizon, by a woman director whose name I keep forgetting, but halfway through that film, one of the physicists says to her, how are you doing? And she said, well, I think I'm beginning to get my head around it. And he says, well, if you ever think you've understood it, you haven't, because none of us do either. And so the idea that everyone is doing this amazing work without understanding it gives us comfort. We're not trying to explain this stuff to you. What we're saying is this is what it's like to work at the edge of possible understanding, which is quite different.
So what kind of a balance are you looking for between science and story?
Well, I think we don't have, there's not that much science in there. The processes are more not more interesting, but more understandable for people, I think, than the science. So it's their fascination with this that I find amazing. Because the nature of, it's one of the problems you have with graphics about quantum physics. You can't explain it in classical language. So as soon as you do it, try to explain it, you've missed the point necessarily. So we tend to avoid going into explanations as much as humanly possible, and just take this as more things like this is, they don't know how this works, this might be right, it might be wrong, and keep it very simple, and more I just think people can understand and just
can empathise.
Empathise with them more,
Yeah, and it is about process. I think this is about, when I first went there and thought about how do you understand what this film is, it's sort of, an old-fashioned thing to say. I'm probably not going to sell it to commissioning editors, but to a certain degree what we're trying to do is a kind of Fred Wiseman-style institutional study, except a bit snappier maybe than Fred. But, you know, it's got, I mean, it's about a place, and it's about a community. It's a sort of sociology of a group of people who are doing something amazing all together with tensions and challenges, and science
competition.
is really... Right, and whatever it is, I mean, they're doing a process like anyone else in a different field. Everyone's got their specialized work, they've got their competition, they've got their rivalries, they've got their goals, and that's really what it's about, except it happens to be incredibly brilliant people who are chasing something unbelievably abstract. I mean, all of this money and all of this work is really, it's about human curiosity. It's about trying to understand what we all are. It's not about curing cancer. It's not about renewable energy. It's not about any of the big problems. It's really about understanding, and that's kind of it.
It's not output-based in that sense. It's not about the output.
Right, it's not about the output, and it's not, and so each one of them, you know, and all of these people could be making millions on, you know, in the city or on Wall Street or something, because that's who has, you know, gotten us where we are now, a bunch of people really good at derivatives who don't, you know, so they haven't sold out. And so it's driven by curiosity about the people and about a world that seems really foreign, but isn't if we spend enough time there.
Should we show another one?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to ask another question about this. So, because it's non-linear, it's not episodic. You're not required to look at these episodes in any particular order. But how does that actually affect the narrative arc, or is there one? How does that affect narrative development, and how does that affect character development as well?
Well, I think it's strange shooting out there, because you are shooting in, because it's a fly-on-the-wall style thing, but then you make short films out of it. You're filming in two directions almost, because you do follow it and things do happen, and there are stories that would take longer to draw out. And of course they're there, and we're used to making films that way, so that's the way things do work. And I think even though you don't have to watch them in order, you see the character. I suppose it's not that you see a character go from shy, retiring person to by the end they're confident and it was all great. You see them in one where they're really happy, something's gone great. You see them in one, they're feeling more vulnerable. And you don't have to watch them in an order that we've ordained for there to be development. We don't have to say, because then you go back the next week and they could be happy again. So these little ebbs and flows, you don't have to put the matrix on it. You can let people just sort of explore and run with them a bit more, I think.
That's the new physics of
But
TV.
are you thinking about the longer documentary yet, or are you still thinking about the...
Yes. I think certainly, I mean, one of the things that's exciting about doing these short films is that while, you know, I mean, there's a process for, you know, all of us, filmmakers at the table, our experiences with long-form observational documentary where your sense of the story that's evolving, you know, changes day by day. You know, you're always sort of anxious about where your long-term narrative is and what you should be, especially at a place like CERN where there are 3,000 people. Who should I be filming with today? Am I going to miss this if I film here? And, you know, all of these decisions. And one of the things that's liberating about doing these short films is, you know, one of the films we're dying to make but haven't cut yet is, you know, it's older couple in their 80s who have been in CERN since 1950 who have wonderful stories about the history of particle physics. Probably won't make it into the feature, but you never know. And somehow liberate, whereas, you know, I probably would have said, well, they're great people, but it's not worth time for a feature doc because it's not going to fit into the narrative. Because we're making the shorts, I think, well, that'll be a good vignette, so let's try that, or one of the film we're going to show at the end. I mean, there are little things that don't quite fit into the larger narrative that you allow yourself to play with. And then you never know when one of them might lead into something that does fit into the feature film. So I see it as a sort of license to reach out a little bit more than we might, because they are vignettes and because you can have things pop in and out.
Does this process allow you to experiment somewhat, and then you can see how people respond to different characters, and that might then inform how you might then want to edit the film, if you see they're particularly responding to some characters rather than others?
It could, yeah. I mean, it's hard to... We're not exactly encouraging negative feedback, so we don't, you know, if some character's really not working. But certainly some characters thrive in this, you know, rise to surface in this format, and that does, yeah, I guess we do. It is stepping back, and the way in which it works, partly for us, and I suppose it's stepping back and seeing which films are being watched, which films we feel work, leads us to decide who to spend more time with.
Shall we look at another film now?
Yeah.
Well, we could look at family rivalries, because as we've been talking about
Sure.
character rather as opposed to science. So should we bring that one up?
You did number 3.
And would you like to just tell us what this is?
Johnny can tell us about this film.
Just wait 1 second. So there are different experiments in CERN, all searching for the same thing, and 3,000 people on them, huge collaborations. But this one couple are married, and they work on rival experiments. And what you really see, I was asking them, well, do you go home and sort of look in each other's bags and things and try and steal secrets? And they were like, not really. We go home, we speak about what people are like, who annoyed us. So we're not, it's just they leave the work at work in a way that you wouldn't be able to imagine. But then they've got this deep connection because no one else understands what they're doing. So when they go out and say, I'm a particle physicist, no one says, oh, I know quite a bit about that. They just glaze over. So you find there's a really high proportion of particle physicists who get married. So we did this just as a sort of little show of what that's like.
But the rivalry is intense,
Yes.
and the guarding of secrets between these experiments is also very intense. And one of the problems we had was winning the confidence to be given the access to this stuff before it was going to be made public. So it's not casual.
Yeah, there are two teams looking for the same things, and they do not share information. That's in terms of whether these things stand on their own or not, you have to really, to get this film, you have to really understand what is treated in many of the other films, which is that CMS and Atlas are at each other's throats. These two big experiments.
Yeah.
So is this clip number 3, is it?
3, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, ready for the clip.
I don't remember the exact statistic, but I think for the sort of the women in high energy physics, a very large fraction of them are married to other high energy physicists. It's just because you spend so much time in your labs that the probability of getting married to somebody or going out with somebody from the same area just increases. People ask you, what do you do? And the minute you say you do physics, that sort of kills the conversation. Then you come across somebody who essentially finds, that they have the same interests, they understand you. I mean, that's a big plus.
What you want to avoid is a situation where, Talika does some analysis, and I'm almost ready, but I'm 6 hours later, and then they make this announcement, and it looks like, well, CMS did this analysis, and Atlas did nothing, right?
People are already working day and night because they don't want to be the ones that were late. So it's competition which is really driving it, and you just don't want to be second.
Because you're doing these things that are not quite public yet, right? You can't tell everyone yet where you are exactly, until you're really done.
So you hear rumors, right? And you don't always know if the rumor is truth or if it's just a rumor.
You just get used to working in this environment where you sort of know there's a little bit of excitement around something, but you always know that it's probably not completely true, the things that you hear.
So if you haven't found something and you hear rumors that the other experiment has, you leave basically no stone unturned at that point.
I view it somewhat differently. I view it as like doubling down your bet. If you don't put everything on one experiment, now we've got something on the other one. So either way, we'll win out in the end. It's sort of fascinating to watch some of this stage. They're all like scientists because they drop something to see if it falls, rediscovering gravity. So every time she does something new, she has to do it 10, 15, 20 times, methodically trying things out over and over again and making sure, and doing an experiment over and over again.
Action and reaction, This is the action and this is the reaction. I guess the question is whether she's going to join CMS or Atlas.
So why do you use captions in the films as opposed to narration?
It's funny because my quick answer is, well, I've always done that. So it's a style that I do in everything, and it's frequently challenged. I think because I like to distinguish between characters. I mean, I don't know why other people do it, and Johnny sort of I established the style, and Johnny followed it in his films. I like to distinguish between characters and information, and I like clear spaces where you're told what you need to know. I kind of think of it as silent films. That's how when I first started using it, I think of it as silent movies, where you're sort of told what you need to know and then you see a story. And so the text gives you information that you need to know, and then the film is the film. It's character and personality and explanation. And a voiceover, I've always sort of been put off by voiceovers. Who's the voice and what are they telling me? And there's something about clear black and white statement makes you say something really concisely because you can't fit too much on the screen.
And we do, I mean, it's very interesting. Some of you may have seen Hold Me Tight, Let Me Go, which we showed here a couple of years ago, only captions. Feltham Sings, which actually had lyrics, was a musical, only captions for this kind of information. And not only was Lewis saying is right as far as I'm concerned, but in this particular point, as Peter was trying to say, that the commentary, if this were a conventional television program, would be tempted to personalize what other people were feeling and build up the drama. This way you just say, this is the situation, these guys are fighting, blah, 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 and then watch. And that distinction is a very helpful one because it neutralizes the presence of the filmmakers. We just provide the setting and then leave you with them. And you can stop the film and read the caption 5 times. If English isn't your first language, you can translate it. I think it's quite a helpful tool for this kind of material.
Now, how much do you have to repeat information? Because they're quite short films anyway, but if we're watching them sort of in any order, how do we orientate ourselves?
That's something it's still a learning curve for us, I think, figuring that out, especially the ones that are a bit more physics-oriented. Like we've got a number of, anything about the Higgs. Do we have to explain what the Higgs is each time do we have to explain what antimatter is each time we go there? And it's a process of figuring that out. How much do you hope that people will, you want people to follow it enough, but they're not going to understand everything, and maybe you're hoping they'll be interested enough to look at something else. But that's the biggest challenge with this series because just the setup can be quite tricky. Yeah, so we're still experimenting.
But surely you don't have to go back to, for conventional television, you do have to assume very little knowledge, and you've got people for one moment only, and you've got to really lead them through it. Whereas with this, you can watch it again, you can go off and find more information, you can kind of go as deeper or as shallow as you want.
I think that's the other thing, actually, because when you're watching it on a computer, you literally have Google at your fingertips. So if you don't understand something, just search for it in a different tab, and you can find out before the video's finished what that thing is. It's very much that you're just hooked into that world far more than when you watch a TV program. You're disinclined to do that.
I remember the first time I did something for commercial TV, within commercial breaks, being introduced to this concept of reorienting the viewer. This was in the States, and so it was sort of like every time there was a commercial break, we had to go back and sort of spend a minute, it seemed, a ridiculous amount of reorienting the viewer because you couldn't expect them to remember what they'd seen 6 minutes ago. So in a sense, it's nice to not have to, we're not, in a way, there's less repetition than a standard commercial TV show.
That's been a problem for me, to be honest, because I do want people to know where they are. So I'm the one of the three of us who would like to have a little bit more guidance in each episode. Over to you, Mark. Do you want another episode or questions?
Yeah, so the metrics that you talked about are not bad. Mm-hmm. But some of these episodes have had thousands of views, and some have had tens of thousands of views. So have you sort of detected any pattern? Do you know why one's much more popular than another?
It seems to, but the main thing is if something gets linked to or seeded on another site that's big, because you get a lot of, then people will come at it from, if you check something every day and then it's there and it just pops up, then they'll be more inclined. Or if when CERN tweets about something on a certain day, people will be more inclined to click. We've not seen, there aren't that many completely clear patterns.
I think there's an interesting problem, and as people are leaving, I just want to say something that, in a sense, is more of a concluding remark in case some of you might leave, and that is this, that the whole experience of this stuff is very different from television, including measuring success. And that, therefore, your question is very pertinent, because we're all feeling our way. We feel a bit like the CERN people, right? We're actually exploring how to make satisfactory content for this new environment? And then when do we feel good about it? You know, I mean, at what point do we say, well, you know, when the overnights for Johnny's film Up Against the Football were nearly 2 million, then we can say that's good, even though we don't care about ratings. And the review, there's a review today in the paper that raves about it. You know, we know what that is. In this stage, you get feedback, you get the odd email. We had a wonderful email the other day, which later on I'll read, about how this comforted the person who is watching, who is frightened. It's a completely different environment, and that's what's exciting about it. I urge you all to really take this seriously, because it's so much freer than working for television, but it's also confusing.
I think, yes, Sean. So that was a question about what is the funding model for this, and can anyone do it?
Well, Roger, do you want to talk?
Well, you go for Peter.
Well, I'll start, and Roger can pick up. But you know, I think when these guys came to see me, they said there is no funding model. I mean, they at that point they were taking the program to broadcasters and seeing if there could be funding to produce a documentary and you know, at the end of the process. What we did was we gave some seed funding to get this process up and running. But where that leads, I don't think any of us knows. I mean, you have to say, could anybody do this? I mean, the point about YouTube or Google Plus is that the tools are there completely for free. So if you're a filmmaker or you're making videos in your bedroom, you can start broadcasting to the world for nothing at all. And if that catches fire, then you can make money directly from advertising against YouTube videos, for example. So that is one potential model. Obviously, you need big numbers. You need to get into the millions before you can start making revenues in that way. But the other possibility is that it starts as something that is funded at quite a low level and then gathers pace. And particularly, I think, as big developments, I think you expect some big developments to happen in the course of the summer. If that picks up momentum and becomes a bit of a phenomenon, then hopefully the broadcasters will come in and say, actually, we want to grab this and fund it for real.
It's tricky, isn't it? Because you can't sell it, can you? The way that if you make a program, you can show it in one territory and sell it in another. It is
genuinely tricky. Liz and I were here a year ago trying to hawk this project around to all the broadcasters around Europe and the world, and they all said the same thing that Nick did. What's going to happen? Who's going to do it? And we didn't get anywhere. That's how I went to Peter. So it's quite difficult. But you're right. I mean, now we've got enough, and we can't sell it. Can't sell the rights to this. But if Liz is able to make this into a long-form film of the quality for other films, then we're on familiar territory. But of course, that takes us away from this uncertain environment. My hope, I'll just tell you, be completely honest with everybody about this. My hope is that somebody, I mean, like Wellcome, although we've talked to them about this, seeing this will say the public understanding of science is so important that we'll just pay you to do it, right? Because this isn't a charity, it's actually, well, it's a good work, but it's like public service broadcasting, only it's on the internet.
And what stops other television networks just actually taking the stuff off YouTube and showing it? Or would that upset you if they did?
No, we want them to see it, but actually, well, they'd have to pay us for it if they did that. But I don't think it lends itself to that. I mean, do you think?
No, not. I think that these are very different from what we would make into a feature film. And the way that it could backfire would be if people watch these and say, oh, well, the film's just going to be like, 30 of these strung together, isn't it? And you say, no, God, no, it's totally different.
But
life in
a day is interesting. And Britain in a day. I mean, it's when people are putting all those fragments together, shot by ordinary people, and making coherent narrative. The one the other day is just fabulous. The British one. I hope everyone saw that.
But people actually have picked these films up. When the Nature paper came out, which was a big breakthrough on Antimatter, I think I'm right in saying. The Daily Mail, for example, in their story about that breakthrough, ran one of these films.
That's true.
So I think most people here would be familiar with how YouTube works and how you can watch stuff there, how you can post it on other platforms, and how you can comment and so on. But what is it about Google Plus that makes this a feature of this project as well?
Well, it is multi-platform in the best sense of crossover, because you blog, you interact, you ask questions, you can have hangs with the physicists. I mean, its potential is very rich in multi-platform terms.
What's a hang?
well, Peter will explain.
What's a hangout? Well, a hangout, yeah. So a hangout is effectively live video conferencing with up to 10 people. So you can dial up your friend on the other end of the line and have a sort of one-to-one video conference, or you can then have a video conference with up to 10 people, and you can actually then record that and put that as a broadcast on your YouTube channel. So yes, as Roger says, I mean, it's very multi-dimensional. You can simply use it as a blog platform. You can have conversations with physicists who are they're actually engaging with the content and sharing it and commenting upon it and explaining and so on. And then of course you can do live hangouts.
And you can see who your followers are, which is really interesting. I mean, it's really intriguing to see who's joined us. I mean, now we've got the numbers are too high to count, but when it was starting up, and I mean, there's some really physicists were early adopters of Google Plus. I think I remember being really surprised when it launched, and there weren't that many people who were on it. A lot of people at CERN knew what it was and were on it. So there was it's a different kind of community than your YouTube community.
And I think that's our experience of Google Plus so far. I mean, a lot of people obviously compare Google Plus to Facebook, which is a much bigger platform, but I think what we've started to see is these quite small specialized communities really using Google Plus as their place to converse and share material and so on.
So you're actually going to have live chats with the physicists on Google Plus Hangouts. Okay. So if anyone here wants to engage in that, could they just go to the Google Plus page, or do they have to create their own profiles? How would they?
They would have to sign up for Google Plus and then follow what's going on. And for example, if we were going to do a hangout tomorrow, you would publicize that on the page, and then people would tune in at a particular time to watch it.
And another thing we're doing on the page, which through Google Plus, which was Johnny's idea, which I thought was brilliant. He's going out there to do another shoot on Monday. And we've got people who are already engaging with the content we're posting, saying who he's planning on talking to, what's going on, anyone have any questions they want us to ask. I mean, getting a sense of a bit of feedback from the audience, and now that they're starting to know the characters and starting to know what's going on, opening that up a bit. So that's an experiment that we'll try, and I don't think you could do that the same way on YouTube, but you can do it. And Google Plus also, we're posting links to articles that touch on themes or things that we're covering in the films, trying to open it up into a discussion that gets a bit more into the science. I think it's a slightly higher end discussion in the Google Plus bit than the YouTube channel. That's the distinction.
So this is quite sort of complex in terms of the production, and you seem to need a whole new set of skills in order to be able to really exploit all the functionality of YouTube and Google Plus. So, I mean, how has this affected how you actually plan the production? And also then, Peter, what kind of support does Google provide to mere filmmakers who probably don't see themselves as being particularly tech savvy?
Yeah, I mean, we've had a few conversations about this. We had a conversation about it over lunch today. I mean, I think our view of using these platforms is just to get stuck in and experiment and see where it leads. And if you look at the most successful YouTube channels or Google Plus pages around the world, I mean, the TED do a fantastic Google Plus page. The White House, Obama is a leader in this. If you think about YouTube channels, Oprah Winfrey's channel is fantastic. And the thing that they all have in common is that there's a lot of activity going on them all the time. And that doesn't necessarily need to be your own content, but if you can have that sort of blend of your own content, linking to other people and encouraging conversations, and just having lots of sort of multi-dimensional, multi-direction conversations going on, then it takes on a life of its own, and that grows organically.
There's this wonderful concept, and I'm sure you all know, but it's this concept called a long tail. And that's one of the features of multi-platform work, which I like particularly, because although I hope our films will be revived, as it were, in the BBC Archive project, on the whole, they're shown, and people ask for DVDs, but that's the end of it. Here, it sits available for a very, very long time. And we are recording the most important year in the history of particle physics. And I was saying to Peter and Mark and Liz and Johnny, if you think about DNA, the discovery of DNA, that particular couple of years beforehand with Francis Crick and James Watson and so on, has been revisited in plays and movies and books, and people want to know how that happened. So if we are getting a sense of what it's like to look for antimatter for the first time, find out why antimatter disappeared at the Big Bang, but we're still here. These are questions that people are going to be wanting to know for years and years and years. And to get a human window into this difficult stuff, I think is going to be really valuable. But You know, it'll be there for years. I mean, that is my idea, my motivation partly for doing this. And there's a man who runs a wonderful institute for science, popular understanding of science, and they will use it in, you know, welcome sessions. welcome, Daniel. But I just meant, you know, I could see welcome seminars on the public understanding of science using our films to say this is what the scientific dilemma is, living with uncertainty.
So, since you mentioned antimatter, should we have a look at the
last
clip here?
Yes, why not?
So, what is it?
This is an antimatter clip. This is one of the trilogies that we were talking about earlier. This is the first of 3, and this was kind of exciting because we were. It's a great character. I love the people in this film, and I mean this experiment, the antimatter stuff. They have nothing to do with the Higgs boson, but. When I got there, I learned, or when I was talking to them before, that they were about to publish the results from the previous year in Nature. And this was a huge deal. Nature is the most prestigious place to publish physics results right now, but they couldn't tell anyone that they were doing this. And I had to be sworn to give away my, you know, unborn child if I told anyone. And they were, you know, incredibly, but they gave us an interview and they explained the whole thing. And we set everything up so that we got this ready to release the first of these 3 films right when the Nature web story went live. And in addition to that, they put the film up on the website of the experiment, and CERN sent it out with their press release about this discovery, it's not a discovery, but about when the news was breaking, CERN sent out the film with all their other materials, which was for us a fantastic kind of seal of approval, because as you can imagine, loads of people are doing things at CERN, but this was the first time they'd actually taken one of these things on board and used it as part of their PR material. So that was great for us, and it gave us a sense of being inside and behind the scenes in places that journalists aren't usually allowed to go.
Okay, clip number 2, please.
This is the biggest result of my career. There's no question about that. You know, this was science fiction a year ago, that you could do what we've just done. For us, antimatter is this sort of evil twin of matter. And the idea now is that matter and antimatter existed in equal quantities at the beginning of the universe, because that's what happens when we try to make them in the lab. And for some reason, we've got this universe that's only made of matter, and we don't know why. We must find the answer to that question, right? The last time we talked, we were modifying our device to try to make the next step in this whole process, which is making a measurement on antihydrogen. That was the whole point of trapping it all.
Just in this area, we have a movable device that can position things in the beam line. And what we're going to do is take this one off and add a new one that has a horn to shoot microwaves into the vacuum. Getting ready to make this thing a much better physics apparatus for actually measuring things.
Physics is an observational science. You don't know anything until you've measured it. If you want to measure hydrogen, you can buy some hydrogen. If you want to measure antihydrogen, you have to make it. A lot of what we've done in the last 20 years is get all the bits and pieces of the puzzle together so that we could actually do these measurements.
Actually, what I'm supposed to be doing today is, this is a pallet full of truck batteries. We use them in a special power supply. And my job for this week is to carry those over there and mount them in the power supply. It's very glamorous. These guys have the unfortunate job of trying to get this device ready under great pressure.
We're trying to assemble a piece that we call the stick, which has a number of diagnostic stations on it. We're adding a new diagnostic station for Walter.
And for which they're all cursing me.
Walter's our great hope for being famous again. He's officially retired and doesn't actually need the aggravation after a long and distinguished career.
I worked on ordinary hydrogen at low temperatures 30 years ago. And unfortunately, somebody remembered that.
If you're around later, you can come and see how this might all look as it actually gets put together. But at the rate I'm succeeding in stripping this, maybe tomorrow would be a better deal.
And this all has to go into the machine when?
Yesterday.
The soundbite question, okay, if you will, do matter and antimatter obey the same laws of physics. Okay? Very, very simple, very, very elegant, but profound question. The whole idea was to make a measurement on antihydrogen. We think we've done that now.
You got any important emails while we're talking?
Not the one you're looking for, no. Other important emails.
Would anyone like to ask any questions?
Well, funnily enough, I was here last year, and we were doing a thing with Jamie Oliver last year, with Jamie's Dream School, and I was asked exactly the same question, and I gave the answer, which was possibly, and here we are. You know, as I said earlier, you know, our aim is not to get involved in funding content, but where there are examples of people doing interesting things that use platforms in sort of new and innovative ways, then that is interesting. So the Jamie's Dream School thing used YouTube to give the longer versions of the lessons that appeared in the cut down shows on the telly. So the answer is possibly, and if there are interesting ideas, we're always happy to look at them. And we do a variety of things, not necessarily involving TV or broadcast. For example, with the Science Museum or with Bletchley Park, we've done things with arts and culture. We did a project recently digitising some of those British Council propaganda films that you may have seen. So yeah, we're involved in a variety of different sort of partnerships and sponsorships, some with television, some without.
So could you bring up the lights, please, so we can see the audience?
Take the very risky approach of asking a question just off the train. I imagine what I'm about to ask has been extensively covered before I arrived. But so my question is: do you know anything about the people who have been watching these videos? Obviously, the great thing about putting stuff online, as opposed to just stuffing them on the telly or even in a cinema, is that you can track and engage with the audience. And obviously, Google knows everything about everybody in the world, sometimes before they know it themselves.
We have access to their data.
Indeed. So I just, I guess I've kind of regretted inventing this concept called the SISI, the SISI, the self-identified science-interested people. And I just wonder, are these being watched by them, or what do you know about who's looking?
I mean, I think just one point. You can look up on the Google Plus pages who is subscribing. I think it's about 600 subscribers, and lots and lots of people following. And it's a pretty erudite bunch of people who are on there. But in terms of who's watching the YouTube videos, you can see insights for YouTube, and you can see, for example, in which country and what the demographics of the people who are watching are, but actually who those individuals are, that we don't know.
But we have had a few comments from people. I mean, the Google Plus is fascinating because you do see institutions and backgrounds, but we have had a number of comments from people who, and I have no idea why they watch the films to begin with, but who say, I knew nothing about this, and thank you for explaining. I mean, really nice feedback from people who, I mean, that's the sort of stuff we're reaching for, from people who say, I never really understood this. And you can tell from some of the comments on the YouTube page that there are people who don't know that much about it, and then there are people who are always obsessed and will watch anything with CERN. But we've been surprised at the number of non-science-y people who seem to be, for whatever reason, taking the time to watch.
Can I read you one? Because this is, we just got this a few days ago, and I was so touched by it, I circulated. I've just spent the past 20 minutes getting lost in your CERN People YouTube channel. I'm totally hooked. It feels very exciting to be able to watch what is being done there, and to be educated about the science in a tone that isn't dumbed down. So thank you for that window into CERN. It's now a definite go-to site for my daily lunchtime fix of video treats, along with TED Talks and iTunes trailers. So that's, ordinary person, not a SISI, which is a wonderful term. And a number of other people who've said this, they're very pleasantly surprised that they can follow it and that they're not scared by it.
So both filmmakers are here right now. So what if the Higgs Boson suddenly makes an appearance tonight?
Well, the great thing about this kind of science is that that's not going to happen. I mean, that's one of the things that we're trying to, and the films Johnny's done recently really get into this, explaining what this process is, which is a massive amount of data accumulation and then analysis, and it all happens on a fairly rigorous schedule. And then everyone holds their cards very close to their chests until a moment at which it's all sort of plotted out. So it's not like suddenly they're going to stumble across it and it's going to be announced, you know, at 7 p.m. tonight.
So you can literally organise a schedule with the scientists as to when you're going to go and film?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain degree. And the schedule, you know, Johnny's going on Monday because there's a certain, they're revealing the data from the last, what, 2 months, month?
Yeah, so the way it works is that, this is the lucky bit, is that they're not biased. They can't look at the data that's coming in at the minute. Because if they look at it, they might change the way they analyse it, and that might show something that's not already there. So they can't look at it. So they close the box, it's called. And then on a given date, they open the box and see what's there. And they do that twice a year. So in terms of searching for the Higgs, it's one of those things, when you get more into it, it's got more of a narrative than you thought it would have. It's like, okay, we might get a cameraman in for that day. Yeah.
But it isn't a eureka moment, because actually, and this is one of the great things about it, I keep saying to people about it, that it's a bit like the play of Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, and Hamlet's off stage the whole time, and it's these two people who are just talking about Hamlet and what's going on there. And in that sense, what we're trying to do is not replicate the news. It's actually say, what's it like? And if these people do find the Higgs as they think they might, then what's the impact on everybody else? And that's the way we're going to read it, is through everybody else. And the Italian story, which you may all have remembered, when they said, oh, right, Einstein was wrong, was faster than the speed of light. Well, at the time, we had lots of people saying, oh, that's rubbish, it must be wrong. And then some months later, they just did the figures again and said, you can't replicate it, it was wrong. But that didn't make the front page the way the original one did, you know, because people want breakthroughs, they want front pages, they want easy descriptions of hard stuff, and it just isn't like that.
Any more questions? Because if not, then we might just call it a day.
So they want to see one last film? That's the other question. Do you want to see one last film? We don't?
Sadly not.
Oh, okay. Well, you can. Go on YouTube when you get to your hotel.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. And don't be frightened.